What a treat here in the Notsam studio. You guys know by now how much I love Terrifier 2. So I'm very happy to introduce to you the writer, the director, the head of visual effects, the editor, all
Sound design.
Sound design. You did sound design too.
That took me forever.
Damien Leone. Welcome, man. How are you?
Dude, I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
So is this as it sounds like, did you really do absolutely everything on this thing?
Not absolutely everything, but a lot. Wore a lot of hats. Primarily doing the special makeup effects.
Yeah.
Was a big undertaking, and that was really just 99% of all that work was me and my producer partner, Phil Falcone, who's not a makeup artist, but when he gave me the money to make Terrifier 1, he said, look, I love the special effects. He's like, I want to hang out by your side. I want to see how you do it. I want to help you if I can. And I taught him how to mix silicone and make molds and everything like that. And now he's gotten pretty damn good. And it's just him and I building everything. So
it's not what he does.
Not what he does at all. No.
Wow.
He was in commodities, retired, just wanted to get into movies. Was
so
making,
great.
That's how I met him, doing special effects on one of his first film that he wrote and directed called Joe's War.
Is that tough for you that you have to be like, look, we're doing this because we love to do it. I know you want to make movies and everything. I can't promise you any money because I can't promise myself any money, but I can promise that we're going to make the best thing we possibly can, right?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much, man. There's a lot of sacrificing. And a lot of people believed in this movie when we were making it. Because there was like a core group of us, maybe like 9 people. Mm-hmm. Some days we'd have more, some days we'd have a lot less. But that's what that's the amount of people that made Terrifier 2. And I told them originally, I said, this is going to take a while. It's going to take maybe 3.5 months. And that's a long time for a movie of shooting. And it wound up taking almost 3 years. Almost 3 years to complete the entire movie. We got hit with the pandemic, of course.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, that did not set us back that much because even though we were shut down for a while, we had shot so much. So I was able to go and just start editing everything that we'd shot already.
And I guess that's part of the beauty of being independent and having a tiny cast is that you can kind of get things done where you need to get things done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There were no rules making this movie whatsoever.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of obstacles. I mean, one of the biggest reasons why it took so long was, for the first time ever, I said, this script is super overwhelming in the special effects department. This is like quadruple the amount of effects I've ever written in a script.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to say. I love the complaint. Like, this is way too overwhelming of a script. Who wrote this thing?
Exactly. And I told Phil, I said, listen, for the first time, we're going to have to hire an additional makeup team to maybe pick up 40% of the slack or something because we'll never get this done. So we did reach out. We found this team, East Coast guys, and they were going to do it. And then a month and a half before they really even started building anything, they pulled out because we couldn't come to an agreement on the budget. Like, we did come to an agreement, but then it was like, okay, this is like overwhelming. We need more. And then it got to the point where they're like, we can't do it for this amount of money.
Yeah.
So now we were really screwed.
Yeah.
And I said, do we postpone now? What do we do? And Phil's like, listen, we have to just jump in and start shooting or this movie will never get made. We'll just figure it out as we go. So we would have to shoot up into a point where the effects were coming up. And then we'd have to stop production. Phil and I would go in his basement and spend a week or 2 weeks building the effects for the scene coming up. We'd call everybody back in. We'd go, we'd shoot, and that was it. That was the way this movie went. It was all stop and go as we were going.
Wow, and so the actors just kind of had to have faith because that's one of those things too, right? In Hollywood, I'm sure there are people around the actors going like, this movie's not going to get made. Yeah. They're never going to finish this movie, right?
Yeah,
like, you just have to have faith in the process.
You have to have faith, man. And it was just an ongoing, became a joke. It was just like, when's Terrifier 2 coming out? If Dave and I we'd go to conventions in between shooting and stuff, and all the fans would just keep coming up, and when's Terrifier 2 coming out? When? And we'd have tallies when people would ask us, at the table. We got
plus you did Indiegogo, so now everybody that's contributed $15 is like, hey, I'm an investor. When is my movie coming out?
And we feel terrible. I mean, there's still people who haven't gotten some perks because some of them were very spoiler heavy, so we couldn't send out props of severed heads of some of the actors. You'd say, all right, this guy clearly got killed in this, or people waiting for the script because you don't want them to know what the story is. So
can't have the ending.
Yeah. But my God, I mean, we could never ever have made this movie without the Indiegogo backers.
Oh,
ever. It was unbelievable. I mean, and that's another one of the reasons why having that added pressure of not wanting to let them down, was so important. So we really just put our all into it, swinging for the fences, wanted to deliver something that was worthy of their expectations. And a lot of fans have just over the years, art's popularity has just been growing and growing, and you have a certain amount of people who are really already putting him on a pedestal, saying he's worthy to be up there with the classic slashers. I don't say that. I love hearing people say that. But when you do have those expectations, it's like, oh my God, we really got to walk the walk now. We really we've got to live up to this somehow, or at least try our hardest.
Yeah, especially because it's been so long since there's been an iconic slasher franchise character. It's like creating a new Christmas song. Like, they're done. Yeah, all the Christmas, like, we're not doing it anymore. Mariah Carey shows up and goes like, I got, all right, Mariah, you're in.
Right? It's just all covers. That's it. It's take what works and recycle it somehow.
So when you have all this on your shoulders and you're writing, you're not only writing for yourself, you're writing for fans, and fans that have now not only are just fans, but they've contributed to the movie, and they've created, they're getting tattoos of these characters that you've created. It's like, that's a responsibility.
That's right.
At the same time, you've got a responsibility that you've actually got to shoot this movie.
Yeah.
Right? As a writer, when you're writing, do you let that dictate how you write? Meaning, do you go, wow, that's a fun idea, but I don't know how I'd shoot that, so let me not write that?
That's a great question. One thing I do, which maybe a lot of filmmakers don't do at all, is I'll look at every criticism I love going on, like Letterboxd, IMDb, YouTube channels, videos, and I look at all the comments, and I want to kind of get a consensus. Like, I did that for part one. Yeah, I go right into the lines then. Right?
That's actually worse than anything art does. Yeah. That's masochism.
It is. I don't mind it. I love it. I get a kick out of it. But there's some great constructive criticism to find within that. I mean, it's filmmakers didn't have that a long time ago. You just have to listen to critics in the newspaper or something like that, or your friends who you can't really trust. But now you get just the real unbiased opinions of many, and that could really help. I mean, that I feel like that sort of helped sway my direction going into part two with things that I could have improved upon, like just a more intricate story, more protagonist that you could really get invested in. That was my main goal making this movie with the Sienna character. So I do like that, but you can't let that completely dictate your vision, because at the end of the day, they're coming to you for your imagination. Mm-hmm. So it's a fine line. At the end of the day, you have to go with your gut and your intuition and say, as an artist, this is where I believe it has to go.
Right. And so that's kind of what feeds in to the right. So do you end up like writing scenes and then going like, okay, like the script feels good. Now I got to figure out how on earth I'm going, like, how do I make a glowing pit that Sienna can fall into, and then it's a thing full of water, and because it gets pretty intricate.
It does. So when I wrote the script, I didn't think about budget. I wrote it as if I had the budget to make Star Wars. Okay. It was just whatever idea I had, I put down, and then it becomes the reality. All right, I'm living in these big clouds now. I got to slowly come down and figure out what we can do with what we have. Oddly enough, we basically shot everything that I wrote in that script. We figured out a way to pull it off. And like I said, we didn't have a big crew. So if something needed to be built, we didn't hire people to come in. We built it. Like, Phil figured out how to build that water tank that Sienna goes
Not a
in.
set builder.
No, not a set builder. It's just a guy who's like, I've built things before. I could build this tank. Yeah. We for that tank in particular, it took us forever from the beginning of the shoot. That was one of the biggest obstacles, was how do we build this thing? Because the way I wrote it originally, it was supposed to be just this clear cylinder that she's just stuck in the middle, and it has no beginning, no end. It's just,
not even hard edges.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And we found something similar in China, and we were trying to figure out how to get it shipped here, and that wound up going away. That wasn't an option. Then we're calling up aquariums, and we're trying to figure out if someone could build this for us, because then I had to then I was like, we can't get the cylinder. Then I turned it into this kind of Houdini water tank magician thing, which worked. I mean, it was like kind of a blessing in disguise because it looks cooler. But
almost like added to like the carnival aesthetic, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then they're throwing insane numbers at us, saying, to build this, it's going to cost $20,000, this and that. And it's like, oh my God, it's going to eat up a huge portion of our budget that we can never afford. And then Phil just did some investigating, called up some old friends he has who's welders, and they work with steel. And he said, I could build this thing. He goes, I'm going to figure it out. Trust me. And this will hold the water. This will hold her. And they built it. I mean, like I helped them carry around lumber and things like that. But watching Phil and this guy literally put it together in his backyard, and that's where we shot it.
Yeah. So were there any scenes that you were like, man, this is grotesque? I don't know, because like I love it, right? Yeah. Obviously. Mm-hmm. And I think that you had to get to a place because obviously you got some iconic kills in the first Terrifier. Like your movies are special in the sense that there are key scenes that people leave going like, you got to see this movie. There's this one scene where, and everyone's got the same scenes.
That's it.
For both this one, for Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 1.
Yeah.
But are you looking and it's like, man, when that arm breaks, whew, that's tough to watch. Is there any part of you that goes, we shouldn't go that far? Or do you go, since I'm feeling that, maybe we should go one step further?
Yeah. For that kill in particular, I said, this isn't anywhere near what I wanted it to be. We have to go so much further with this, honestly. That was one of the circumstances where the pandemic was really a blessing in disguise, because we started shooting, you know what I mean? It's not a blessing, but we turned it into a benefit.
Right.
Because we had started shooting that scene, and like I said before, with the team that pulled out of doing the makeup, so we had nothing really prepared. So we had to rush whatever makeup I did have, and we went in, started shooting it, and I'm just watching it, and in my head, I'm like, this is nowhere near the hacksaw scene from Terrifier 1. And
that's what it is. Of course, by the way, these are the two scenes. Of course.
Exactly. And of course, the fans want us to rival or surpass the hacksaw scene. It's a no-brainer. And I said, this is not coming anywhere close to what I imagined. This is never going to hold up. So then when the pandemic hit, I called up David Howard Thorne, Art the Clown. I called up Phil, and I said, listen, guys, we have this time now. I said, I need to reconfigure this entire scene, and I have all this time to actually build really intricate moments that we could, really just showcase this. And they said, fine, yeah, of course. I mean, Phil was on board, and then went to Phil's, and we got cracking, and we started molding his daughter Lisa Marie, all her body parts that we used as Casey's, double, like her back and her arm and her leg, and that scene in particular. But to answer your question, so there are, when I'm writing these scenes, I am very conscious of a line that I don't necessarily want to cross. Now, of course, I've crossed that line based on other people's taste and their line, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm writing a scene like that, I imagine 5 steps worse that where I can go, and then I say, no, that's we're gonna alienate everybody. That's gonna fall into an extreme level of bad taste. Mm-hmm. So let's reel it in and bring it back here. So again, my taste is, my line is extreme, and I know, and I purposely want to push the boundaries. I want us to step just over that line where we go a little further than your Hollywood horror movie is gonna go, but not to a degree where you walk away feeling like that was way too much. The world is like bleak. I feel miserable. You know, I want you to have fun. I want you to know this is a fictional movie. There's a heavy layer of fantasy that's obvious from the first 2 seconds when you see this killer clown resurrected from the dead. We're in a fictional world, so you can. It makes the violence a little more palatable, a little more accessible. So
yes, and the fact that you're like that's the buy-in, right? Like once you're like, Art's not dead. How is that even possible? Right. It just is. He's just not dead. And you're like, all right, well, if I believe that, let's go on the ride.
Like, strap in. Here we go.
Yeah.
Trust me.
All right, let's go. So when you think about, you were talking about adding elements to this movie and sort of going like, okay, we need to add a final girl. We need to add story elements that weren't there for that first Terrifier. I feel like the first Terrifier was really almost an exhibition of, here's Art, this is what he does, this is how bad it can get. Yeah. So this is the jump off point, right? Was there any part of you that's like, okay, we're making this far more supernatural. Mm-hmm. We're bringing in far more fantasy elements here.
Yeah.
Which can be hit or miss.
Yeah.
Was there any part of you that goes like, oof, like the violence is there? If you like the first Terrifier, you're going to appreciate the violence, but man, I hope this fantasy lands.
Yeah, and listen, it did not land for a lot of people. It's very polarizing.
Interesting.
And I knew that going into it.
Yeah.
I said, I'm taking a huge risk here with that element. And the violence and Art the Clown is my safety net, basically.
Yeah.
I felt very confident writing Art the Clown in this. I thought the kill scenes were going to be really cool if we pulled them off. But like I said, I felt very secure with all that. But my whole thing going into this was, if I'm going to resurrect this character and he's going to be this supernatural evil now, I want to really dive in and explore that. Whereas that's just sort of a traditional trope in other slasher movies. And the filmmaker, the writer, they just say, basically, that's what the boogeyman does. He comes back. We don't need to explain that. People aren't interested. It's just what they do. Like, I'm not interested in that. I want to explore, what is this evil force driving this character? How is he back from the dead? What? I mean, that's a huge element. How are you just glossing over that? And if there's a supernatural evil, there has to be a supernatural good to combat this evil. I mean, there has to be a counterpart, or else what is the point? What is the point of all this?
Yeah.
I mean, he blew his brains out at the end of the movie, at the end of part 1, right? Blew his brains out. He's back from the dead. Are you telling me now all of a sudden like a butcher knife is going to kill him, is going to take him out? Like, there needs to be more. Something has to be powerful enough. Something and someone needs to be powerful enough to combat him.
Yeah, and some kind of cosmic link, right? That's what I got from it. That clearly these two characters are linked.
Sure.
You know, not only just because of the familial connections that we kind of brush upon and go like, there's more going on here, but even the fact that like they could see Art's sidekick, other people couldn't see Art's sidekick.
Yeah.
Like, it's like there's something. By the way, the sidekick
The
in and
little
of
pale girl,
itself is like a bold choice,
right?
Because that's one of those, like, historically sidekicks is like jump the shark, right? They didn't have to.
Great point.
But obviously this one worked. This one worked for me. It worked for a lot of fans. Was that something you were conscious of, or are you like, I can't second guess?
Yeah, I did feel secure about the little pale girl. But what I didn't want to do was make her a sidekick that's by Art's side the entire time, where she starts to overshadow him.
Sure.
So I was very conscious of that. I said she just has to show up just enough to keep her fresh, to keep her interesting, but she cannot overshadow him in any way. I didn't want him to have a sidekick the entire movie. So
because that's what people are showing up to see, right?
Yeah. So when you see him, I wanted to have those moments where he's alone and the big kill scene in the middle. Like, I did not want her to pop up anywhere in that moment. She's really there just as his guide, basically, in the movie.
Right. People started making comparisons to It, right? They were like, when this thing started to hit mainstream, firstly, what was there a singular moment where you were like, Terrifier 2 is hitting? Like, this is, because it hit mainstream like in an incredible way. Was there one sort of thing that made you go, oh boy, this is better than we could have expected?
Yeah, I think it was the moment that Stephen King tweeted about us.
That's it.
Yeah. He tweeted about us twice. The first time, he kind of asked his Twitter followers, he said, this Terrifier 2 looks pretty good. Anybody see it? Or something.
Like,
I mean, that's it. That is the pinnacle of, if you're a horror geek like I am, okay? There's nothing higher. There's no greater heights. I mean, Stephen King is the master, literally the master of horror.
Yeah.
He has at least 20 movies that are my favorite, that I'm obsessed with, Not even just horror. You're talking Stand By Me, Shawshank Redemption, Misery, Green Mile. I mean, endless. Yeah. Endless. So, like, that was just the cool. And also, I'm obsessed with him just since I'm a kid as an actor from Creepshow.
Of course.
Favorite, right? I think of Jordy Verrill still when I'm seeing Stephen King. So that was unbelievable. And then I think the next day or 2 days later, I wake up and I check my phone, and it's almost everybody I've ever met texting me saying, dude, Howard Stern's been talking about you for the past 20 minutes. I'm just like, oh my God. Like, oh my God, Howard Stern.
Which is hilarious, because I talked to Richard Christie, and he said that
my buddy, I love that guy, man.
Did you know that he didn't respond to his emails? So in the credits, his goofy email address is in there instead of his actual name.
Unbelievable. I'm going to make it up. We're going to send him something nice.
So, but okay, so then once I found that once it started hitting, like, the daytime talk shows, and
Right.
it became like the talking point that this is what we're talking about. Lots of comparisons started being made to it. Speaking of Stephen King, right? Do you get that comparison, or do you think that it's just a? I mean, to me, I'll tell you, to me, only thing I see similar is that they're both clowns,
Both killer clowns.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
right?
I mean, listen, and maybe a little more so now because he is supernatural and
Sure.
Pennywise is supernatural.
Sure.
But when I'm writing this, it is the last thing I'm ever thinking about, especially. But I owe a lot to it for the design of Art the Clown, because when I created him, I said he has to be as far away from Tim Curry's Pennywise as possible.
And is Tim Curry the essential Pennywise that you think of?
For sure. He's still the king, in my opinion, of the killer clowns,
Yeah.
And that was it. So I was like, he can't be colorful. He can't speak. He's not going to have hair. He's not going to have a red nose. Just like go down the line. So that was a big part of it. But yeah, I think it's different enough, honestly.
I don't.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think it's very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't heard too many comparisons to it. I'm sure there are plenty. It's inevitable. But yeah.
Because of clown culture,
Clown
being what it is.
culture.
But
I never thought my life would really be, just consumed by clowns one day.
But you've fallen in love with this character, though. I mean, this is not like, this is something you created. Art the Clown in what, 2000?
A long time ago. I don't remember if it was 5 or 6. It was somewhere around there, and it was. Do you curse on this? I mean,
yeah, sure,
I'm
whatever you
trying
want.
to hold
Yeah.
that, but it slips sometimes. I don't
Go
want to
for
be
it.
rude, but I'm just saying. So
I mean, we're talking about Terrifier 2, for God's sake. If we can't curse.
trying to be polite.
I appreciate that.
But so when I made that first short film, right, it was going to be my first official short film. I was out of high school, didn't have money to go to film school. I took one aesthetics of directing class at the New School University, and I said, this is not for me. I was way too immature at the time to appreciate what was being taught to me. They were teaching film theory, and you're looking at Godard and these Truffaut and all these kind of like artsy foreign filmmakers, and I'm like, this isn't why I want to get into filmmaking.
Right.
I want to show me Taxi Driver and Jaws and things like that. But so I said, I told my mother, I said, listen, since we can't afford to send me to film school, I said, would you give me money to make my first official sort of short film that I can submit to film festivals, and maybe somebody will find it and Hollywood will come knocking on my door or something. I need to have a calling card. And she agreed. She maxed out some credit cards, and my uncle gave me some money. Yeah. And so this was like, okay, I do special makeup effects. This has to be me throwing just shit at the wall and hoping something sticks. Like everything I've kind of ever loved, I want to kind of just like condense and pack into this short film, and hopefully something grabs somebody's attention. And I always had this idea of a clown harassing this woman on a city bus in the middle of the night. That was it. It was just this one of 100 little horror ideas that I've had floating around. I said, that's a good way to start off this short film. I'm going to take my crack at the killer clown. So it wasn't like there was this big lightning in a bottle, light bulb going off moment where I said, that's Art the Clown. There he is. This character is just going to go take off. It was like, wow, he's a cool, striking character, and he's got a really cool, creepy personality, and I'll put him at the beginning of this short film. And that was it. I never thought one day I would just be surrounded by clown culture, killer clown culture.
Yeah, and you'd create a lore.
Yeah, and
a full-on lore around
But even back then, man, it was... When I showed people that short film, they said, oh, the demons are cool, your makeup's cool, but that clown at the beginning is insane. Like, he's so cool, I have to keep seeing more. You have to make more things. And it wasn't until I made the second short film with him, which was called Terrifier, and that they're both of those short films that were put into All Hallows Eve.
Right.
Yeah. And that's when I made him a slasher officially, and I started really developing his sick, sadistic sense of humor. And that's when I kind of had the light bulb moment inside. And I said, he really is cool. And he can go far. I need to put him in a feature.
So is that why All Hallows Eve was the 3 short films inside one? Because that way you could incorporate the other short films you had made and make something full length out of it?
Right. Well, that was an odd experience that it was not what I ever envisioned for this character, for the trajectory of Art the Clown. It was just, I'd submitted these short films to some film festivals. They played, nothing crazy. And then there was nothing left to do other than throw them up on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And the producer of All Hallows Eve was just sort of scouring YouTube looking for Halloween-based short films that he already had planned to put into an anthology called All Hallows Eve. And he contacted me. He loved Art the Clown. He said, dude, I want him to be the face on this poster. We're going to center the movie around him. He said, and I just have to find some other filmmakers and find their Halloween-based shorts. And I was like, no, I have this other short film with Art the Clown called The Ninth Circle. I said, that'll give us like maybe 35 minutes. I said, how long does a movie have to be? 80 minutes? I said, maybe if you give me a couple extra bucks, we'll do one more short film and a wraparound story, and then you don't have to find anybody else. And he was gracious enough to let me do that. So it was never something I wanted to do. I wanted to jump right from Terrifier, the short film, into Terrifier, the feature. Yeah. This was 2013. And nobody wanted to give me that opportunity whatsoever. I mean, he didn't even want to, not that he didn't want to, but he couldn't even raise money to make Terrifier after All Hallows Eve. I mean, even though it was semi-successful for what it was, it was so low budget. I mean, by the time he got it, was already, half of it was made. I think we put an extra $10,000, $15,000 into it. So All Hallows Eve cost $15,000 plus my other 2 short films, or something absurd. But yeah, he got the note at the time. He said, listen, I've asked some distributors and stuff. They said killer clowns cannot sell a movie.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah, I'll never forget it.
But it's what an origin story.
Right?
Oh, it's the best that you have that quote.
You can't make it up. Clowns can't sell a movie. And this was before, though.
By the way, while you're wearing a Captain Spaulding shirt, promoting Terrifier 2.
This was out. It wasn't out. There were rumors that they were going to make it. It was known, and there was also Rob Zombie. It was known that he was working on 31. So I remember specifically telling him, I really believe clowns are going to be big. I mean, they're going to hit. I said, this is the time. Everything's cyclical. It's the time for killer clowns. We should really hop on this. But they couldn't do it.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it came out, and it became literally the highest grossing R-rated horror movie of all time.
Right.
And all time.
You were like, wait till you guys see what I can do with no rating whatsoever. Right. So, where did you learn, firstly, where did you learn practical effects? Because what's interesting about Art the Clown, and I think that one of the things that makes it so appealing, and him so appealing, is his facial shape. You didn't just take a guy and paint his face. Right. Like, there's the weird structure, the way the cheekbones come out and the way the nose comes down. Like, there's clearly practical effects to make him look scarier than a normal human would look.
Sure.
How'd you learn to do practical effects and makeup?
Well, yeah, I mean, just to go back to his face, I mean, the first prosthetic I sculpted in the Ninth Circle short film, the first short film with him, was much more subtle, but it still had the point. I'm sorry, I just bumped that. Still had the pointed nose, the pointed chin. I really wanted to give him sort of a comic book Joker feel, mixed with a witch and the devil, just the classic look of a devil with the pointed nose and everything. And then when I made the short film Terrifier, I wanted to redesign the makeup because I wanted it to be a little more extreme, and I wanted to blend a little bit more of a zombie look in him. That's when really the sunken in eyes and the more pronounced cheekbones came into the design. And it's just, I mean, it's a look that we're so, it's sort of ingrained in us with zombies and with the devil, with a witch. It's something that we just love as horror fans. So I thought that would really add to the character. But I'm self-taught as a makeup artist.
And a filmmaker.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Self-taught. But when, because I was always artistic growing up, I would make my own little comic books and stuff like that. I would sketch and draw. But when I was around 7 years old, and I was already obviously obsessed with horror and VHS tapes and VHS collection. So I was watching Friday the 13th, Part 6, and at the beginning of that VHS tape, they had the coming attraction to this documentary called Scream Greats, and it was produced by Fangoria. It was an hour-long documentary based on special makeup effects wizard Tom Savini. So
of course.
Everybody, Tom Savini, he's the guy who created the design of the first Jason. He did Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead Creep Show. I mean, he's considered the king of splatter. He was one of the first American makeup artists to really bring graphic violence into the slasher movies, where you actually got to see some really nasty stuff. And it was the first time I saw in that coming attraction the guy who made some of my monster heroes. I saw him with the puppet from Friday, the Jason replica from Friday the 13th, Part 4, and I saw him with the fluffy monster puppet from the Crate episode of Creepshow, and I'm like, oh my god, like this is a guy. This was like a big light bulb moment for me. This is a guy who makes these, and it's artistry. It's 3D artwork. Like I knew what it was. It stood with me. But I was still very young. But when I was 12 years old, my mother took me to meet him at a horror convention for the first time. And I was super nervous. I got to meet him, and he was really cool. I said like 2 words to him because I was so starstruck around him. And just coincidentally, this vendor was selling starter makeup kits. And another vendor was selling real machetes that were dulled, and they had a semicircle cut out of the blade. And that's a classic Tom Savini gag that he uses in many movies. You just put it up against your skin. It looks like it's like cutting your neck. It looks like it's buried in the flesh. One of the oldest tricks in the book. And I bought that. Well, my mother bought me that. The kit and a bottle of mint-flavored blood. And when I went home, I now consider that the first day of the rest of my life because, yeah, when I dove into that makeup kit, I'll never forget the smells of the latex and the makeup. And just the first thing I learned how to do, just experimenting with makeup, is I would put a thin layer on, which is just liquid latex. It's just a glue rubber, right? And while it was still tacky, I would fold the skin onto itself, creating this amazing deep crease. And I just put a little trickle of blood, and it was seamless. You could be this close to it, and there was no makeup seam or anything like that. It looked like I had a huge gash in my face, kind of like if you've seen Platoon, like Tom Berenger, he's all scarred, kind of had like that effect. And I would do that to each one of my friends, and this was their parents had no idea I was into this. So I would do that, and I would send them home, and we'd make up a lie, saying we were playing football, and he hit his head in the license plate, tripped into the car. And I saw one of my friend's fathers, like, he just got home from work, and he lost his mind. He's like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. He's like, I just got home, now I gotta take you to the goddamn emergency room. And see, by the way, didn't care that his son was split
gashed open, bleeding. It's like, I was gonna go home and watch this.
100%.
He's inconvenienced.
Yep. And I'm just sitting there like watching this, getting such a rush, and I'm saying, I totally fooled this adult. This is one of the greatest feelings I ever had. And that really just like lit the fires right there. I was off to the races. And then and it was just really about getting my hands on more effects, getting my hands on Tom Savini's makeup books, and just learning his techniques and just trying to replicate things I was seeing. And I started sculpting with mortician's wax. And this is pre-YouTube. So something that really helped me was I got my hands on these VHS tapes. It was 3 of them, the series of 3 VHS tapes, and it taught me how to make prosthetics and sculpt and mold making and making foam latex.
I know you just like rewind, pause,
That's
rewind, pause, do this. Okay, play, rewind,
yep,
pause.
Burning out the, you know what I mean? Burning out the fucking tape. That was huge. So between those books and just really just digging in and just getting my hands on the materials and just figuring out what they do and what they could,
And then how did you learn how to make a film, right? Like, I mean, because as the person who's cinematographer, editor, like...
Well, I'm not the cinematographer.
Okay.
That's the one thing I do not do. That's my buddy. He's also one of my co-producers, George Stuber, has filmed with me since All Hallows Eve.
But know what you know and know what you don't know, right?
Yeah. But, I'm still hands-on. I set up my shots. I know how every shot I want it to be and everything. But I'm not good with technically setting up lights and things like that.
Gotcha.
But,
so how did you learn that part of it? How did you learn how to... edit film? How did you learn the composition of a shot? That's all.
Just studying movies, watching. That's it. Eat, breathe, sleep movies. I mean, I can't tell you. My life was consumed by films, and just once I was doing those special effects, my buddy Danny, his father had a camcorder and would lend us the camcorder, and so I would film the makeup. And then when I started learning about some of these Tom Savini gags and that they're illusions specifically for the camera. So I try and make that work. And this was before I even knew about editing. I with a system and editing, an old school like analog, none of that. So I was in camera editing. So I'd rewind to the place I wanted to cut. I'd stop there and then I'd pick it up and change my angle and stuff. So that really taught me how to edit. And then I just keep watching movies and I just pick up techniques that I'm seeing and just like jump cuts and cool little things like that, and you just start gaining all this knowledge over time and just really just consuming all this film language.
And then because at some point do you start, even as a kid, like, or a young person, looking at film, and now I'm not just appreciating the movie, I'm looking technically
100%.
At what's happening now.
100%.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think the first time where I realized what the power that a director has, or his signature, that he could literally put his stamp on the movie, was watching like Scorsese's movies.
Sure.
Because he has such a distinct style and he does so many, Scorsese techniques that he uses specifically in his movies, like with, wish pans and all these kind of, freeze frames. And you could tell without even knowing he directed the movie that it's a Scorsese movie just based on his visuals. And I said, wow, he's essentially starring in his movies, as the
almost as the without being a literal narrator, as being he's the narrator. By
absolutely, he wants you to know this is his movie. This is me. This is going to stand out. You're going to know when it's my movie.
Yeah.
And that was just that was a cool moment. It says, wow, you could really take charge of your movie and put your own style into it. I mean, I don't go that far. I think my style is a lot more old school, classic, sort of traditional, just like locked off shots, composed, smooth movements, just like early George Romero or John Carpenter. I kind of,
I think it becomes distinct because, especially going to a movie theater, and I think that's kind of what makes this a special thing, right? There's not that many movies that are coming out with in-camera effects.
No, not
that you're seeing in a theater, like they're using practical makeup, like. You can dig around and still find stuff, but like the fact that you could go to a multiplex for the whole month of October,
mind blowing,
and see this thing. So you got this movie, or this movie got into corporate multiplexes, without a rating, correct? How?
Apparently, you don't need to present your movie to the ratings board.
Just don't.
Apparently, just don't do it. Just don't do it. See, the thing is that, it's just become the industry norm that you kind of have to do it, and then you have to deliver an R-rated at most, or else no movie since the 80s wants to get slapped with an R rating, basically, because it's a death sentence. Because if you really stick to it, you're really not allowed to let anybody into that movie then, unless they're 17, I believe.
Yeah.
So that could really hurt your movie. So they make sure you have to get an R rating. I mean, we didn't care because it was so, again, the theatrical experience. I mean, us putting it in theaters was almost like a little lucky kind of gimmick. We were like, ooh, we get to just put it in theaters for like 3 days, on 200 screens or something. It was going to do nothing. It was just a cool chance to be able to see it in the movie theaters. And then before you know it, I'm hearing, well, it's going to be 500 theaters. You know what? It might actually be 800 theaters. And then before you know it, it's friggin' blowing up, just blowing up.
That's amazing. Yeah. And is that kind of how it happened, that it just, how did you get that first theatrical run? And then once you got it, did it all just kind of leapfrog off itself?
Yeah, so the company, and a huge, I have to give huge credit to Bloody Disgusting and Cinedigm.
Yes.
Who, they're the distributors who came in to pick it up. Because, of course there was that discussion at the beginning about delivering, presenting it to the ratings board and potentially having to cut it. And I had many discussions with them saying, listen, if you cut this movie, you're really doing a huge disservice. Like, I know that the violence is such a huge element. It's just an essential part of this franchise. And
it doesn't work otherwise.
No. It's like cutting 2 out of the 4 legs out of your table that is Terrifier. You're going to devastate this movie. And they were gracious enough to just say, listen, we believe in you. We believe in the artistic integrity, the length. None of that's going to be an issue. So, on our end, I mean, we're just gonna put all of our chips in, basically.
That's awesome.
Which is so rare. It's so rare. But that's the reason why this movie did what it did.
Yeah.
It really, because it's unprecedented. Everything about it is unprecedented. You do not get to see an unrated movie this violent in AMC's and in Regal's. Especially a sequel to a movie that was very obscure. And
right.
All of a sudden, now you're just putting the sequel in.
Although it was nice that, like, with all the story and everything, people kept asking, do I have to see Terrifier 1 to see Terrifier 2? I was like, nah.
You don't.
No,
you really don't.
I would imagine that there's probably a lot more people that saw Terrifier 1 after Terrifier 2.
I think you're probably right, for sure.
Than before.
No doubt.
How do you guys, and I'm sure it's you and the actors all together, but figuring out that balance with art, because one of the things I think that makes art amazing is that there's this humor to him, right? There's this sort of almost vaudevillian slapstick nature to him, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from the seriousness of the violence. because that's the worry, right? That if you're enjoying this character too much, either you'll root for him to be violent, or it'll take you completely out of the violence because you're having too much fun laughing, and then one or the other isn't effective. How do you find that line?
Yeah, it is. It's tricky, and I'm always conscious of it. And I always say, at the end of the day, we can never go too far with the laughs or with Art being goofy. It has to. He always has to revert back to being this hardcore, sadistic, cold, evil killer.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until really when I made Terrifier the movie that I realized that we could inject a lot more levity in there with the character, and that would work, and that the audience would gravitate toward it a little more. So I started writing moments where he would kind of wink at the audience, not literally, just saying do something just do something kind of quirky after every kill, or do something funny with the body, or just something where, like I said before, it kind of makes the violence, it might give us a little pass where we could be a little more extreme, and the audience is still having fun at the end of the day, even though we just did something so repulsive, you know. It is a fine line, though. It is a fine line, but it's so important that he remains horrifying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what we're talking about being polarizing, I think one of the real polarizing things about this movie in a general sense, like outside of fans, is that it's one of the rare ones that there are people who love it.
Yeah.
And there are people who are like, you're a serial killer yourself. Like, you're a maniac person. Have you had people, like, I've said this before, but this is one of those movies that like I went to a theater by myself, because when I do eventually watch it on TV, I know it's the type of movie that my wife will come downstairs, look at what's on the screen, and go, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Who did I marry? What is this? Have you had people that didn't like the movie talk to you about wow, it's too violent? What are you doing? Are you crazy?
Yeah, I get it. I get it often. I mean, I see it more in comments. Like I said, I read almost everything. So articles that pop up and people's comments on YouTube, they say, "Oh my God, this person's insane. He's got some. You'll find out." I saw one comment. The person was like, "You will find out in the future. This guy has some demons in his closet. It's gonna come out."
Will we find? Do you have demons in the?
We'll have to see. We'll
I love it. Oh, the mystique is the best part.
But no, I do. I get that a lot. You know, what's funny is I showed a rough cut of this to my mother before it came out. This poor woman literally just had heart surgery, major heart surgery, like 2 months before I started showing her this.
And this
maybe I am a serial killer. Now it's starting to.
And I think this is what she's got to keep in mind. She's the one that gave you the money for the first movie.
Money for the first one.
This is her fault.
It is all her fault. She named me after The Omen. She introduced me to horror movies, and you know, here's the thing. Once I got into makeup effects, and you know, I'm living at home, obviously, and I'm destroying every bit of her house with fake blood. I've destroyed her wallpaper, her tiles, every bit of grout in her bathroom, because I always do I would take the blood pumps into the shower, and that's how I would test all these things. Destroy her grout, and it was just years of being scolded, and you know, so I'm always hoping that one of these movies hits, and I could say, "Look, it wasn't all for nothing. Like, look what I did. It's all for you.
It was all for you.
It was all for you." And you know, and so I was excited to show her this, and not to mention, of course, she loved horror movies, but she absolutely hated Terrifier 2. Like,
really, your mom didn't like it.
Hated the violence.
As a horror fan.
As a horror fan. And I do have some really funny, because she didn't know I was filming her. I was in the background, you know, on the couch, and she's up at the table watching it on the computer, and I'm filming all her reactions, and she's just screaming and covering her eyes and cursing at me, and she's saying, I can't take this anymore. She's like, "I don't know what happened to me. I don't know what's wrong with me. This isn't for me anymore." She's like, "This is different. This is like serial killer stuff that you're doing." I'm like, "Of course it is." I'm like, "But don't you see the artistry that went into this?" I'm like, "Aren't you proud?" You know, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm proud of the movie. The movie's good. It's well made. You know, she's really proud of it, but the violence is too much for her, where I've lost her now, you know."
What did she raise you with? Obviously The Omen. I mean, she liked it enough to name you after The Omen, but like,
see, it wasn't so much that she force-fed horror movies on me. She loved all different kinds of movies, but she loved like action movies and sword and sorcery movies. Like she loved Red Sonja, was one of her favorite movies growing up, and that's played a big part in this. Obviously.
Yeah,
in
sure.
Sienna is Red Sonja. So I was just watching R-rated movies sometimes as a kid, and
Gotcha.
you know what I mean. She took me to see The Lost Boys in the movie theaters when I was 4, and that had huge. I remember that like it was yesterday. That's still one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, it's the best.
All time,
Yeah.
the best. So I just sort of segued on my own, and she saw, hey, if he's watching these action movies where people are getting their heads blown off, I mean, he could watch these slasher movies. And it started, believe it or not, with taping movies off of television.
Sure.
So they were cut. So it's not like you're seeing like sex or hardcore violence. So I was growing up watching Nightmare on Elm Street 1, Friday the 13th Part 3 and 4 off of television. So they're not that bad. And then it's like, all right, he's fine with that. Now I could take him to the video store and he could start renting them. And then you start getting the uncut versions. And I'm still not turning into a serial killer. I'm not killing animals or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it happens. And before you know it, I'm in love with these characters and they're like my heroes. And I'm doing all kinds of artwork and drawing monsters. And then I get into special makeup effects. And it just starts just kind of a natural progression, albeit an odd one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
As a movie buff and somewhat of a historian that you are, you must have gotten such a kick, because I've heard you say that this was not something that you did, and I'm glad that you insisted upon it, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, this is wrestling, like this is fake, they're doing it. When it came out that people are fainting, people are vomiting, and it was very like old school cinema.
Yes.
See the horror. But I was like, I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same. It was great. And that, I feel like, was what put it over the top. Where people were like, every show in the world was like, there's this movie that people are vomiting and passing out during.
That's what did it.
Yeah. Did you love that started to...
Love it.
You loved it.
I love it. It's one of the coolest things ever. The only thing I didn't like was, listen, I heard stories that, his guy passed out and, cracked his head open on the back of somebody. I think that was the first story that I heard. I went to, because I think it was after the first weekend that it was showing, I went to the city with my buddy George, the DP, and we saw a screening, and it was when we got out and I was taking the lift home where I saw on Twitter someone posting about that, like someone passed out. Oh, someone just passed out in my theater, hit my chair, and I'm like, wow. And I'm like, dude, look at this. And then someone else posted, someone just puked in my theater, and there was literally a picture of puke, like outside.
Wow.
And I'm like, is this really happening? And I swear to God, that had nothing to do with us. It was not a marketing ploy. It wasn't a publicity stunt to get, which it's ingenious. I wish we did come up with that. And to be honest, then there were even talks like, do we go with this? Do we start and we had internal discussions. I'm like, dude, everything that's going on with this movie is organic.
That's it.
It's organic. That's
so
the
smart.
only reason why it's taking off. Don't fuck with that. Don't try and, force feed it. Let it be what it is. Everything about this is natural. And it's always been that way. We've never had a marketing machine behind Terrifier, behind Art the Clown. It's all word of mouth. It's all the fans. And just let it keep going there. Let this thing have a life of its own and do what it does. For better or worse.
Yeah, ride the wave. Don't try to control it.
No, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Just go with it, and it keeps rising and rising. I mean, I have to imagine that, after all these years of you making films and doing things independently and stuff, that things have to be different for you now. All of a sudden, you made a movie for $250,000 that grossed $8 million in a theater that was not rated.
Right.
Not to mention has the streaming deal and everything, but. From what little I know about the entertainment industry, I have to believe that when you can take $250,000 and turn it into an $8 million movie, that there's a lot of new people that are knocking on the door, and that life is starting to get different for you now.
It is. It's getting interesting.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I mean, if I could do that for $250,000, what could I do for $3 million? Right? I mean,
Well, okay. So that was my other question. It's like, all right. Let's say whatever the next thing is, Terrifier 3 or a different idea that you have. Do you go, let me see if I can get a big budget? Or do you go, I don't know, man, the formula of a little budget and, scrapping things together and building stuff and just figuring it out, that's what works. Like, do you what do you do, or do you just say like, no, I think we can make things huge for $3 million?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. Listen, clearly the formula works, and it's a safe play if you keep the budget down. Of course, you'll make an easier return, and
Sure.
your investors will keep coming back to you. But listen, I would love a chance to make a Hollywood horror movie, just to have that experience. It's not something I need. It's just a great opportunity if it comes my way. It could be fantastic. But I'm almost 40 years old, and I've been making these movies by myself since I'm 12 years old. I mean, this is my life. This is my trajectory. I have no problem if I'm just stuck here making $200,000 movies for the rest of my life. As long as I get to make them, I'll figure out a way. We'll figure out a goddamn way to build that tank. You know what I mean? We'll figure
absolutely.
it out. We'll make it happen. But listen, I don't know if it's smart to. I probably can't say names of, but
Sure.
Hollywood, production companies have been. I've had interviews with about 4 of them so far, and they're interested in finding out what am I working on. They want to send me ideas. They want to know what's next, which is very new to me. This has never happened.
People want to be in the Art the Clown business.
Yeah,
people want to be in the Terrifier business. It's like,
yeah, I mean, listen, they're just interested in what works, and right now it's proven that there's an audience for this clearly.
But also, if you look at like October, and you go like Terrifier 2, out of nowhere, massive hit.
Out of nowhere. Yeah.
Barbarian,
yes.
hit. Halloween Ends,
Yeah.
hit.
There's more. Oh, Pearl.
Pearl was a hit. There
Hellraiser.
Hellraiser on Hulu is a. There was one other one that I really liked too. That Smile was a hit.
Smile
was a huge hit.
The biggest one. Actually,
yeah, and so, and I'm sitting there as a horror fan,
it's like a renaissance. Like a new
loving
renaissance.
all of this because I'm like,
it's wonderful.
the only thing making money is superheroes and horror movies.
Yeah.
And like that means we're gonna get more horror movies,
Listen,
right?
Yeah. Listen, horror is one of the only genres that's consistent. I mean, what type of horror changes, right? So that goes through cycles. You'll have your slasher, then you'll have your ghost movie, your demon movie, your found footage. Like that's all cyclical. But horror as a genre is always there. It's always a moneymaker. Horror is a natural human extension. We need to experience it.
Yeah.
The only like action movies, superhero, those things. It's like we need those movies. It's dramas have their they dip. Comedies dip big time. We've seen that ever. It's now that the comedy genre in movies, it has been probably the most dead it's ever been in the history of movies in like the past 10 years. Like there hasn't been a huge franchise comedy movie since like The Hangover or something. Like
which is interesting because
it's a long time ago now.
Yeah, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It was hot.
Yeah. So that's wild. But yeah, I mean, so right now I'm at the point where I'm really struggling with because I clearly made Terrifier 2 with the intention of making a part 3.
I would hope so.
There are so many questions by design that were brought up and will be answered, explored as we go forward.
Did you hear people speculating? They were like, I'll bet he didn't answer all those questions because he's trying to get some more of that Indiegogo money.
No, I haven't.
I'm sure. I mean, I found it. I think it's a fairly disprovable theory.
Wow. Yeah.
But I did read some of the comments, or maybe I heard it in other people's reviews where it was like, maybe he didn't answer all the questions because he knew we'd want to know the answers, and then we'd have to invest in the Indiegogo. And I'm like, this is very, this is very a lot to get not a huge return.
No. This isn't. I care too much about the integrity of the movie and the movie as a legacy to think about ways to steal people's money. It's ridiculous. I mean, and then I see people just saying, like, oh my God, none of this makes sense. Like, this is just, like, I don't even care. It's just him throwing shit at the wall. Like, no, there's really not one arbitrary thing in this movie. Like, everything is happening for a reason, even though I didn't explain it. I mean, I would have had to write an additional character to come into this movie to literally give you the exposition,
right?
Or they'd have to find it literally in a book and say, oh my God, like this is what's going on, and the character would have to read exactly what's going on,
which is not how you tell a story.
No, that's not the movie. That's not the story I wanted to tell here. I wanted it to present itself to Sienna and Jonathan the way a nightmare would unravel. You don't know what's going on. It's like all these insane things are suddenly happening to you in your ordinary world. To me, that's really interesting, especially on this level. I mean, you're talking about, and I wanted to say before, like with Art being resurrected now, and he's this supernatural entity, and now you have Sienna, and the cool thing about her character that you don't typically see in slasher movies with a final girl is she's also on this trajectory of becoming a supernatural entity. They're the same character basically, but just like counterparts.
Yeah.
So, and they're both on different journeys, but leading to the, you know what I mean? They're different roads leading to the same endpoint.
Yeah.
Which to me was really fascinating.
You're not, you know that the fork meets somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're not sure.
Yeah.
It could meet very, very soon, and there's a lot more in common with them than we think, or it could meet far away. So, yeah, when I was watching, I go, well, clearly, not only was almost nothing was answered, but this world was presented, right?
Yes.
And I go, and I took away saying there's a logic here. I can't define it yet, but there's clearly a logic. Like I felt like there was a reason for everything had a reason for being.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the reason is because I'm finding out at the same time the characters are finding out.
Exactly.
Right? That I'm on the same journey that Sienna and her brother are on.
It's in real time. You're in their shoes. This is what's happening. And
do you have the answers?
I do.
You do. You know where you're.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I always say that until it is set in stone and locked in the editing room and out of my hands, anything could happen. Anything could change because you never know when or where inspiration could hit you. So if I think I have the greatest idea now and then one day something happens to me and I go, oh my God, that's it. That's so much better. All right. And it could just take this whole different, it can go on a whole different trajectory. I'm like totally open to that. But everything I do, there's a reason. I'm not just like throwing that in and saying, all right, I'm going to figure that out later. This is just cool, but it has to make sense later. I have everything, and one of the reasons why I didn't want to explain everything now is because I'm having so much fun with Art the Clown, and I want to explore another movie with him. I want to maybe even two. I don't know, maybe two more movies, and I don't want to just give you everything in this if I'm going to make more, and then there's literally nothing else to say.
Yeah,
and then it just becomes an excuse to bring him back to kill another group of people. And you're just going by the numbers, and it's your part 7 at this point, which people love. I love them. I watch them all the time.
But it's a different thing.
It's a different thing. I'd rather this be a full, fleshed out, solid story. Whether it's 3 movies, 4 movies, where you can actually follow this journey and this arc with your heroes and your villains, and walk away hopefully saying, "Wow, that was satisfying. I know exactly what that is. I know exactly where these characters started and where they end off, and not where they sort of." And this isn't like a negative critique, but you see these movies where they go to a part 13 and it's just an excuse because the character's so popular and people just want to keep seeing the character. But the bad thing about that is you're on the journey with these beautiful heroes sometimes, and then they start dying out, or they, you know what I mean? Like their journey just peters out. And if you watch the movie at the end of the day, as a whole, if you watch the franchise, you say, what the hell was the point of that character? Why did I follow that character for 7 movies? He had nothing to do with anything, the grand scheme of things. I'm afraid of running into that. I want to have just a nice, solid story and do justice to every character in the film.
It also allows you to take your time with stuff. Like the Clown Cafe scene, insane.
Thank you.
Insane. The fact that we got to spend some time there in the nightmare wasn't like 30 seconds. It was like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah. I said I knew going into this movie. I think if you even see my original Indiegogo campaign when I was talking about that scene, I said, we're trying to raise money because I have this really big scene and we have such a small budget. I was hoping that, and I really wanted to put that scene in the movie. And I said, one of my description was, it's kind of like David Lynch meets, I forgot, Maniac meets something, like the whole tone of the movie. And going into Terrifier 2, I love David Lynch. I really wanted to have this abstract element to this movie where there are just things that you do not know what's going on the surface, but they're just hitting you on a sort of subconscious level, like playing themselves out like a nightmare would. Yeah. And that was so important. But I'm glad you brought up the Clown Cafe, because I've heard people say that fucking scene, like it's cool. It's so long and it's so pointless. Like it's just a it's just a nightmare scene. It's not. I will give you a spoiler right now.
Hit me.
Well, I'll say that I can't go into the details, but it is not a nightmare. It is something that presents itself within Sienna's dream. So it is something so much more crucial to the entire story. And I actually do spoil what it is on the director's commentary. So if you want to see the Blu-ray, yeah. But again, and it's not.
But
saying,
I mean, yeah, I also think that clearly there's exposition going on in that scene. Like there's a lot going on happening under the surface. There's a lot like where are we? It's more than a dream because it translates into her reality.
Right.
Like
that's a big part of it too.
Right. It seems like everybody except Sienna is in on it. I mean, you got to figure out how to light a person on fire for it. Like, I mean, it's just
first time I ever lit people on fire.
Beautiful.
That was interesting. That was
beautiful.
That was intense.
Speaking of Sienna and Final Girls, like, I mean, it's one thing to create a new sort of staple franchise horror slasher creature.
Yeah.
Final Girls, I think, are even more rare to create Final Girls that connect. Like, I mean, Laurie Strode is the pinnacle, but like, Nightmare on Elm Street, sure, you had, at what point in filming, or was it even before filming, did you realize like, yeah, she's nailing it? Because to me, I was like, that was such a big part of this movie that we've got two horror icons in this movie.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I've been saying this for a while now. I mean, Sienna is my favorite character that I ever wrote. I love her more than I love Art the Clown. I love Art the Clown. That's my baby. But I mean, she's so much closer to me, so much closer to my heart. I mean, she's based lightly off of my two older sisters. There's a lot of characteristics that I put into her from my two older sisters. And even a little bit of me, just her being an artist and the things that she spends her time doing. I mean, that's like, that scene where her mother's, chewing her out after the wings are on fire. Like I literally took dialogue. I almost set my house on fire one night doing makeup in the middle of the night. And like, I had that argument with my mother yelling at me over that. So that was important, but I love heroes as much as I love villains, even though you would think I'm just steeped in horror and villains. But oh my God, like I said, growing up loving Red Sonja and loving especially Ripley from Aliens is possibly my favorite character of all time, from the second James Cameron Aliens. I mean, she's just like the perfect character. So I really wanted to take my crack at a heroine and a final girl, but make her as visually striking, like give her the respect that you give to the villains and turn her into this larger than life, almost comic book character where, you'd want to dress up like her for Halloween, or you'd want to get her tattooed on you,
Yeah.
I love visuals. Everything with me is usually a visual first. Like it has to be otherworldly. If you're going to come to the movie, I want to show you things that you just don't look at all the time. It's got to be cooler. I want to try and give you my imagination. I want to, hopefully there's some cool shit going on in there that you want to take a peek at. So I wanted to put her on that same sort of pedestal. But aside from that, it's like once you have the look and you think this character could be cool, now it's what is her personality? How do you really flesh her out? How do you get the audience on her side to empathize with her, to sympathize with her, and be on this journey, be rooting for her at the end, especially when people love Art the Clown. I mean, most people would probably rather have Art the Clown kill everybody in the movie.
Sure.
But if you can win people over and you get them cheering for Sienna to kill Art, I mean, you've done your job. That's probably not the easiest thing to do. And the reception we've gotten with for Sienna has been amazing so far. It really has. I mean, you have these people saying she's like the best final girl of the 2000s and all these wonderful things. And I believed it as soon as I saw Lauren's audition, Lauren Levera, right? There was never a runner-up for Sienna.
Wow.
So as soon as I said, oh my God, like I saw her reel and I saw her read a scene with Elliot Fulham plays Jonathan, and when I saw the two of them read together, I said, oh my God, they're just gonna like elevate this material. Like these are the characters. And I've never had an actor that I've worked with, care more about a character that I wrote than I did. I mean, it's virtually impossible. It's like someone loving your child more than you love your child. And she was so obsessed with Sienna, and she would go off and write these journals, and she would fill in all this information on her own and flesh out Sienna, and then call me up and say, do you think Sienna would do this? Would she be into this? Like what kind of music would she listen to? And I would make playlists for her and say, well, I think this, I'd send her all that kind of synthwave stuff that I put into the movie.
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful experience. It was so amazing.
That's awesome.
And we were really, whether people gravitated toward her or not, or rejected her, I mean, we fell in love with her, and me and Lauren were just so proud of her. And,
you know what's interesting too is like the mother is such a low-key, great, crucial, important character.
Oh man, I appreciate that.
Because I feel like she kind of defines why Sienna has to be this kind of powerful figure. Because like the mother has the best of intentions, but is so like such a draining person.
Yeah.
And is like in her quest to do what's right is so self-involved.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a thing that a lot of people grow up with. And it's one of those where like, it's not the mother's not doing it on purpose. The mother doesn't even, but it's just who she is.
Well, you find out that's the pieces of the puzzle are slowly revealed as the movie goes on, and you find out the trauma that the mother's been dealing with the entire time, and it all makes sense. But you nailed it, because that allows Sienna to take on the more maternal role with Jonathan, and Jonathan confides in her a lot more than he confides in his own mother, and that was so important because, at the end of the movie when she's got to go and save her brother, I mean, it just makes it so much richer.
Right, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Do you have any, do you have kills in mind for what will one day be Terrifier 3 or Terrifier 4? Are there, there are scenes in your head?
There's a few. There's one. And again, that's another reason why I don't want to make too many of these movies, because how the hell where do you keep going before you inevitably either jump the shark or go into an area of extreme bad taste, or everything just gets stale.
Sure.
Right? So there was a kill that I was going to do in Terrifier 1 to Tara after he saws Dawn in half, and I said, listen, there's no way we can do these back to back. The audience will get up and walk out of it. That was a perfect example of one of those things where I said, no, that's way too far. That's impossible. We can't do that. We're going to alienate everybody. So it's a really disturbing kill scene. It's like up there with the hacksaw scene. It's pretty wild. Yeah. I've had that in my head for a while. I think we'd circle back to that.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, look, man, I mean, I love the movie. I've talked to a lot of people that did, and I think that as a filmmaker, you dipped into your ability to tell a story in this one without sacrificing all the violence and everything that people love about Terrifier 1 and everything that made it special. And I think people are still focusing with Terrifier 2, especially like mainstream people, on how brutally violent it is, and it is. But it also really, I feel like you did the work to be like, no, I'm going to flex some storytelling muscles
on
this, and I thought it was really, really effective. I did see that as of the day that we're taping this interview, there is a 3:00 showing in a theater by me, so it is still in theaters in spots.
Yeah, I think it's playing till the 11th.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then but it's on Screambox now as well.
Exclusively on Screambox, and then it's coming out on physical Blu-ray, 4K. There's so many different editions. I think Walmart gets an exclusive Steelbook. Best Buy gets an exclusive 4K version. Mm-hmm. Then there's the standard Blu-ray on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a distribution company that's doing all the Blu-rays? Is it like...
It's all Cinedigm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
That's pretty awesome. It's pretty amazing, man. And we got that Stephen King tweet on the cover of the Blu-ray.
Oh, really? Beautiful.
His quote.
That's awesome. And you can't say for sure what you're doing next. You don't know if Terrifier 3 is next for you or not?
I don't, but I will say I'm probably going to know very soon what's happening. I'm going to have to make a decision very quickly.
Yeah.
But I have the entire treatment for Terrifier 3. And so I could just jump in and bang that out, turn that into a script. It would probably take me like 2 months to turn that into a script, and then we'd start going.
Off to the races.
Yeah, and what I don't want to do is make another 2-hour, 20-minute movie, all right? I know that's a little much for people. So there's so many ideas that if it starts getting too big, I may split Terrifier 3 into two 2 movies.
Would you want to film them back to back if you did that?
That's a good question. Yeah.
That'd be a fun thing to
Perhaps.
do.
Yeah.
Film them back to back.
Might be the smartest thing to do. Honestly.
Yeah, especially because then you could make the call. You could do like what they did with X and Pearl, where it's like 6 months later, boom, here's another one. You like that? Here's another one.
Exactly.
Or wait a year.
Or just wait.
Whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do. Well, I appreciate you making some time and talking about all this. And yeah, we'll definitely do it again. I'm excited for you, man.
I would love to, dude. Thank you so much for having me. This
of course.
was seriously a blast.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Thanks.
Thanks, buddy.